Kansas? 3:30 a.m., right? Well, three, just, yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay. Well, there's, it's possible he's still sleeping, right? We'll see. We're not really waiting for, other than maybe for Chuck to join us, right? To jump online. So we'll start on at 1:30 as scheduled. Just a few minutes, please. He was going to zoom in, and I did get an email. We were exchanging emails earlier today. I'm just wondering if he. Okay. Still no Chuck, is that correct? Dr. Rice, Professor Rice is not with us still, so let's hope he joins us. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is A.G. Kawamura. I'm an active farmer out in Southern California. You might say I'm an urban farmer or a farmer in an urban area. Both would apply. We lease all the ground that we farm on, but it isn't without watching an enormous amount of urbanization in the course of a lifetime. California, once upon a time, was one of the top 5 producing counties in America, agricultural products, and that in my lifetime has gone from that number down to probably one of the last places. That being said, this panel, which is Biofuels and the Circular Economy, a roadmap to net zero, it has implications for farms and ranches and forestry all over the world, all over the country. And more importantly, we recognize that we are witnessing in real time a significant cascade of wonderful practices, wonderful technologies that are converging together all at the right time to give us opportunities to create new streams of revenue, new ways of addressing the issues of waste, the issues of efficiencies, the issues of meeting the regulatory burdens of different states, different countries. And with that, we know that our ability to move forward comes with this idea that every day there's an opportunity to create a collaborative, innovative method to move forward. Good example, I know that on our own farm in California, in Southern California, there's been a rule that you can't take green waste and put it in a landfill anymore. And by not being able to put it in a landfill, where can you take it? Interestingly, a lot of that green waste that comes out of the landscape and the urban landscape, the urban forest, if you will, can be put into compost use on different farms and ranches in the region. I'm one of those ranches that is able to take that in a circular way, bring some of that organic matter and bring it back as a soil amendment into my own farms. So it is not without reason to think that these practices can be replicated everywhere. We're going to have a talk today. I have some experts in the area. I have Doug Burvin right here with the poet, one of the top biofuel companies in the country, in the world. We have Verity Ulibara, who is a rancher out in southern New Mexico. And we have Bob Lowe, the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. We were hoping to have Professor Chuck Rice on the station here today with a Zoom call, and he had a presentation to kind of set the stage of the science behind what we're talking about. I think let's go ahead and run through at least the slides. We can see from the slides some of the activities that we have. Mm-hmm. And before we get started, of course, a special thanks to IECA and all the great work you have done to allow us to have a platform where we can talk about the solutions that come from agriculture. Special thanks to, again, our sponsors here, U.S. Grains, POET, North American Meat Institute, of course, the Canadian Cattle Association, and Growth Energy. We also had, at one point, we were going to have Bob, they got you on here perfectly well. So we're going to go to this. The biofuel and building a scientific roadmap to a carbon negative agriculture. This report by Chuck Rice, Professor Rice, has been out there for a little bit as he constantly is adding to it because that's how fast the science is advancing. I'm not going to even pretend I can describe the science behind his presentation, but you can see that this idea of sequestering carbon to look for the opportunities for reclamation of waste into useful products. All of these come in the food, feed, crop arena. We just see that there's been a lot of movement towards it. Why? Is because there's revenue there, and there's opportunities to turn what someone else's trash with someone else's treasure. That still holds true today, and we know that conversion capacity has never been actually more exciting as we speak. When we do have a circular economy that works well, you have these efficiencies that are lined up here. You see carbon efficiency, water efficiency, nutrient efficiency, and energy efficiencies. We all realize that the more the inputs that we use on farm can be lowered and quantified, but more importantly, valued with a lower input cost, that lowers our ability to produce and get a crop out the door onto the market floor and sell it, hopefully at a profit. And the struggle always is we hear about reducing labor costs, but the ability to reduce your waste costs and hauling waste away, the ability to lower your fuel costs by significantly competing and creating your own fuel, for example, on site is everything. I could explain this very easily by telling you go to Professor Rice's website at Kansas State University, where he has done tremendous work in this arena of bringing the economies and the science together to give us a lot more solutions. Chuck Rice, by the way, has been the chairman of the National Academy of Sciences Board of Agricultural and Natural Resources. And as such, he's been able to be sitting there in the middle with some really incredible minds, trying to make sure that we're not falling behind, but actually leaping forward on the what's possible, what's feasible. And with that, what's possible, what's feasible, the acceleration then of new solutions has never been faster and never been better. We all understand circularity just by the simple idea that there's processes in nature that we can see, we can witness, and as mankind tries to, out of this century, let's say, we might have moved away from some of that understanding in the century behind us, but we've come back to an understanding that these circular economies have been going on for millennia and millennia and millennia. And if we can start to replicate them, start to understand them, we've been saying lately that indigenous knowledge is a good example, or the science and the art of agriculture. The art of agriculture has been around for a long time. What's exciting is the science is advanced enough that we're starting to be able to describe some of the art. And with that, wasn't that a great presentation by Professor Rice? You never know, he might come in. So what I'd like to do then is ask Doug to go ahead and move forward with the presentation. Doug, you want to move your own slides actually, and go ahead and go forward. Push the button on the right.
This right here?
And then we'll move over to Bob Lowe for his presentation, then finish up with the actual hands-on rancher farmer.
Okay, thank you, AG. My name is Doug Burvin. I'm Vice President of Corporate Affairs for POET. If you're not familiar with POET, we are the largest biofuel producer in the world. We produce about 3 billion gallons of ethanol on an annual basis, about 14 billion pounds of distillers' grains that is shipped all around the world, and a number of other products. I won't go into it for time's sake, but go to poet.com. You can learn everything you like about our company. What I want to talk to you today is not about the benefits necessarily of ethanol or biofuels, which are numerous, but I want to talk about biofuels as a tool for improving agriculture. We like to think of the potential of agriculture as the greatest story never told. That's a big statement, right? But what is agriculture being asked to do today? 3 main things. Provide nutrition for a growing population, right? Is anybody in the ag space really worried about being able to feed a growing population? I don't think so. Yields are increasing. Technology has always been ahead of population growth. It's not about population growth. It's about economics. The second thing we're being asked to do is provide resources for an energy transition, right? Biomass, grains, all these different things. We need to transition energy because we've been taking coal and oil out of the center of the earth for the last 200 years and putting it in the atmosphere. We need to get in balance of nature. So we need to reduce that fossil demand. And where is it going to come from? Agriculture. It's hard to even think of getting rid of fossil fuels today, and I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but 200 years ago, there weren't fossil fuels. We got everything from the surface of the land. 200 years from now, I think we're going to be doing the same thing again, because of the potential of agriculture. The third thing we have to do is reduce greenhouse gases and combat climate change. So the question is, can we do that? How do you do that? And this is just a very tip of the spear, few slides on each of those points. Number one, I want to point out that 20 years ago, the food versus fuel argument was raging. You can't put corn in a gas tank, people are going to starve all around the world. We said that is hogwash. This is surplus grain. We need to build the biofuels industry to balance grain markets so that farmers can make a margin. Agriculture was dying in the mid to late 80s in the Midwest. We started a biofuel industry. You can see the green line, the blue line, the light blue line are all the growth of biofuels. Look at undernourishment around the world. As we started balancing markets for grain, we gave opportunity for farmers around the world to provide for themselves. Because if we have $2 grain and it costs $4 to produce it, and we ship that around the world, what do we do to global agriculture? We ruin it, right? And I would venture to say that it's as dangerous for developing countries to depend on the United States for its grain as it is for the United States to depend on other nations for its energy. Agriculture balances both food and energy. Undernourishment has come down while biofuels has grown. I think that answers the question of whether we can feed a growing population. So this is just a look at corn yields. We live in the corn world. So the United States produces about 175, 180 bushels per acre, national average, in the United States. The rest of the world averages less than 70 bushels per acre. Think of the potential. If we get the right technologies, the right practices, and a margin in agriculture around the world, look at what we could produce. We're not going to get all these countries to meet US standards overnight, but in 20, 30 years, that's very possible through the potential of agriculture. We have a philanthropy group called Seeds of Change that does a lot of work in Africa. And in Africa, we are going out to farmers with village-based advisors. We're giving them a better seed, a better technique, and within 1 to 2 growing seasons, we see 500 to 900x increase in yields on those farms. Not irrigated. That's what the potential of agriculture is. If you look around the world, that is tremendous potential, but these countries need markets. Markets leads to margin. Margin leads to investment. Investment leads to innovation. And innovation is what is going to allow us to meet the potential of agriculture. So the third thing that I said is reduce greenhouse gases, combat climate change. This is a photo from NASA. You can see the really bright area there. That's the corn belt of the Midwest in the United States in the spring and summertime. That is the largest carbon sink on planet Earth in the spring and summer. Photosynthesis. All of the corn, the soybeans, the grass, the trees soaking up carbon dioxide, sequestering some of that into the ground. But let's just take the corn kernel, for example. That corn kernel is a third carbon dioxide, right? When we put that through fermentation, we can capture that CO2. And we do capture that CO2 today. POET, our company today, provides 5% of the food grade CO2 in the United States. And that's only capturing a portion from a few of our plants. We can capture all of that CO2 from all of our plants, put it in a pipe, and sequester it forever, actually decarbonizing the atmosphere in an economical way. That is seriously reducing greenhouse gases and combating climate change. There's not another industry that can say they can capture that CO2 and sequester it in an economical fashion. We already do it. So this is a very simple slide of where we are at, where we're going. I wish I could share with you our graphic design, which is much bigger, much more involved. But we are taking in, obviously, corn. We're making ethanol. We're making distiller's grains. We're making purified alcohol. We're making renewable diesel from the corn oil. We're feeding all kinds of animals. The ethanol industry in the United States produces enough protein to feed 550 million people their daily dose of protein through the distiller's grains, right? So we're not depleting the world of nutrition, we're enhancing the world of nutrition. Now, how do we get to carbon neutral? Well, we bring in corn and biomass, we sequester the CO2, we improve farming, we do on-farm scoring, and we incentivize farmers to lower their CI score. We use biogas. There are a lot of different things, but if I showed you the grander picture of this, you would see that through all of these things, with anaerobic digestion, solid fuel boilers, and a number of other things, we can produce all of the fertilizer from bio-based products. NP and K can all come from the land. It doesn't have to be synthetic anymore. So just imagine, this is the circular economy. We're providing not only ethanol, but power of all different types, products of all different types, bio-based nutrition for the plants. We're sequestering more CO2. So what I would leave you with is this. I think biofuels are a wonderful thing. They're great for a lot of things. But the bigger picture is biofuels are the catalyst for successful agriculture. Successful agriculture is key to solving society's greatest problems: climate change, poverty, hunger, disease. Without growing markets, with our yields all growing, we're not going to solve any of them. We need to grow these markets which are assisting agriculture to meet its potential. I'll leave it with that.
We can leave that here. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. I recognize that the multiple products that come out of your processes and other agricultural processes is part of this 1 + 1 = 3. As we look for innovative collaboration, we start to see that if we were just hanging out in our different silos, literally, um, and that was what was happening a century ago up to
Yeah.
some point. You mentioned that a century ago we didn't have tractors on the planet. My friend that is 97 years old and retired remembers the horses that he plowed with. And so the enormous steep curve of where we're headed as a world and the acceleration, as I mentioned, that cascade of new technology is not taking us by surprise, but it is something that we need to make sure the populations of the planet recognize that we're not in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s. This is the year 2023. These wonderful solutions are already in place, but they're being replicated and scaled everywhere.
AG,
Uh,
can I say one more
please
thing?
do, always.
30 seconds. So in the I mentioned that agriculture was dying in the Midwest in the mid to late 80s, and it was. Biofuels helped resurrect it. So we have a blueprint in the Midwest for successful agriculture that can be replicated around the world. Imagine if we put 200 ethanol plants in Africa. Just think of the global agricultural renaissance that we'd be talking about. And you put it in China, you put it in India, you put it in all these countries that are struggling to find markets for their products. It changes the world. That's the greatest story that is never told, and it's not understood. And I'm glad that COP is now recognizing agriculture as the potential solution that it is.
And when we say that successful agriculture supports a lot of things, successful agriculture does sustain civilization. It's kind of goes without saying. Of course, that's why we have finally a food and agriculture day here at the COP, because it's beginning to dawn on folks that you can accomplish sustainable development goals, all of those, without a successful agricultural piece. When we talk about agriculture as what's a good way for the public to understand it? Agriculture is the management of different life systems and the sustainable use of resources to create food, feed, fiber, fuel. The livestock industry has been doing this for a long, long time, as long as humanity has been around. In fact, one of the first acts of humanity was to manage a life system that would give them a more predictable and dependable food supply. Isn't that true with the livestock? So, Bob Lowe, go ahead and let's talk about what the Canadian Cattle Association has got on their plates, literally, and where we're headed.
Sure.
You're on.
Okay, sure. And thanks for that, and thanks for that presentation. That was an eye-opener for me, actually. I guess where we come from as far as biofuels go, where our association, when it first came around, you heard a lot of farmers say, oh, sure, it wasn't appreciated necessarily. We don't grow a lot of corn in Canada. We've tried it with wheat. It's not as effective. Where we came from as the Canadian Cattle Association was it's a market. And our existence in Canada and the cattle industry depends on developing markets. So it's a market for agriculture, the grand scheme of things. Created another market. The net results of that in Canada is the DDGs that we feed to cattle now as a protein source. Has become, I won't say the industry wouldn't survive without them, but it would take some adapting. It's become a normal part of the feeding culture in Canada to get protein enough to feed the cattle. I won't say cheap source of protein, but a viable source of protein. Cattle are great at the circular economy. So we take a product that's coming from the land, which is corn, that is completely renewable. It gets renewed every year. The trouble with oil and gas, it gets renewed every 200 million years. We don't have that long to wait. So it gets renewed every year. It creates an additional market for the grain farmer. It creates a value add to the cattle industry. Cattle are taking the DDGs, which I'm not sure what good they would do if they weren't cattle feed. Use that to help produce a very nutritious meat source. we use vegetables, we use a whole lot of stuff in the cattle industry. A ruminant is an amazing thing because the rumen can adapt to a whole bunch of different things. And I guess where the biofuel industry, as far as that goes, it's been a huge benefit to the feeding industry in Canada, which is kind of where we wanted to go, where we wanted it to go, and where it proved to be. A few years ago, when we still are in a major drought, but we were importing virtually all of the feed into Western Canada from the U.S. Midwest by train, which is like 1 million bushels a day or something the trains had to supply. I didn't realize it then, but a third of that was DDGs until we started trying to make sure the plane, I thought it was just straight corn. A third of it was DDGs, so.
This collaboration that continues to take place then in sourcing all the different ingredients, the things we need. I'm a vegetable grower, and I'm always looking for new sources of nitrogen, new sources of potassium, new sources of phosphorus coming out of the stream of waste streams, if you will, or resource streams that are available to us in our regions. This is turning us around into a more competitive, I guess, realm, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, where you're constantly trying to lower those input costs, because in many ways the commodity markets don't necessarily go up. We always argue that we're price takers, not price givers, and no one knows that actually better than Verity, who understands that finding your market, finding your cost centers, it's a narrow balance. So Verity, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of where you are, what's happening, and more importantly, as you've conveyed many times to many of us, that there's optimism to be had, but you have to work for it.
Yeah, thank you, AG. My name is Verity Labari. I am a farmer. Also, I wear many other hats, but we'll talk about it from the farm perspective, the production perspective. It's really hard to add a lot to what Doug was saying. I mean, it's almost like he was preaching to the choir, and I wanted to add an amen. I'll give a little bit of a background on my farm operation, mostly just to set the stage of why that's so important to create the markets. So today, my husband and I operate a 9,000 acre farm crop and livestock operation. About half of it's pasture lands, grasses, and the rest of it's crop ground. We raise grain, sorghum, wheat, and hays and forages. And we have a cow-calf operation, and we produce beef. We produce calves, and we feed the cattle. But I don't think I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for an ethanol plant that was built in our area about 30 or 25 years ago or so. I grew up on a farm. I grew up driving the tractor. I loved it. My favorite thing was the combine. When I finally got promoted to the harvest crew, that was the best day ever. I could spend all day on a combine for 2 weeks. But I didn't think that was in my future. As Doug mentioned, the margins are generally pretty tight on a farm. I had 3 other siblings. I was the eldest of the 3, and growing up, it was tight. It was tough. I remember going to the grocery store with my mom, and it was this is our list. That's what we're going to do. There's no margin for error. My dad was working all the time. I didn't see him very much, but it was still a great quality of life, and I could start to see the value that was provided as I grew. When I went to college, I started in engineering. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I thought I've got to get back to the farm somehow. But I knew I would have to create that on my own. I wasn't coming back to a farm that I could plug and play from an inheritance standpoint. I was not the next generation for that farm. I would be a 5th generation farmer in our area, but not on that same land. And so what do? I went to college. I got a degree in finance. I figured I need to learn about business and understand how that works so that I can have a profitable business and hopefully leave that to the next generations. That finance degree led me to an ag lending job in the farm credit system. So not only do I understand production agriculture and the risks there is from producing it, I understand it from many sides of the desk. I understand what it looks like to analyze farms financial, producers financial, what that looks like. I understand the stress that's involved from both sides of that and trying to mitigate your risk. Um, but that ethanol plant that went up changed my perspective on the fact that it could be profitable. When my dad started hauling grain down there, it took a couple years for it to kind of see the proof in the pudding. But we started living a little bit less marginal, if you will, and it opened my eyes to see that you could turn a profit. And the most important thing to be able to do that are more than one market. You have to develop more than one market. You have to have a choice. You need to develop a demand pull to be able to have the reason to have a supply to do that. And so I and it's not just me, but all across our area, you could see the economic development that that had for our rural communities. It it gave more of a balance. And that slide that you had, I don't know if we can pull it back up, but if you can do that, this slide looks like my region. Now, the one thing that might be different is we don't grow as much corn as in the Midwest. We have a little bit different crop mix. We do grow corn, and most of the grain corn does go to an ethanol plant. We grow grain sorghum also, and I especially need to do that because I don't have any irrigation. Most of the corn that is grown in our area is irrigated, and it's for grain or forage for one of our dairies or feeding operations. But this pictures are worth 1,000 words. This did not exist 30 years ago in my area. People were leaving the area, and now they're coming to our area. And it's a huge eye opener to see the opportunity that's not just for my kids, but for others in the world. We have a lot of immigrants that come and can find their way of life because they can plug into this system and add value in the system, but back to their families. And I think that just really drives the point that when we talk about our economy as a whole, global economy doesn't have to be regional, micro, macro, but the producers, instead of being the start and the end of this equation, they're really in the middle. And in agriculture, it doesn't necessarily matter what you produce. This example, we're talking about biofuels. But there's this back and forth, give and take. We produce something that gets put into the value chain, and in return, we get things back. So we get a cleaner burning. We're growing things, we're sequestering carbon, we're putting a feedstock into this system, and we're getting the benefit back, not only in added profit for our bottom line to continue that incentive to keep us doing it, but we see this benefit of our conservation and sustainability practices are improving our yields. They are making a difference. And it just goes to show how important it is to keep that at top of mind that every day, what am I going to do today, right? And we get jaded by our daily tasks. But what I'm really doing is helping provide, as a farmer, producing my products, I'm helping to provide the opportunity for those that either don't want to farm or cannot farm, do other things with their time. When we have our basic needs met, which are food, shelter, water, those types of things, we're not worried about living or eating or all of we're secure in that from a food security standpoint. We can have the energy to do other things. We have the energy to build all these wonderful buildings we see here in this city. We have the ability to have a city in the desert because we have opened up markets and developed trade. And by doing that, we've improved lives all around the world. And that renewable circle just continues on. And for me, that gives me purpose. It provides a value to others. And I really hope that that will continue so that my kids and your kids will be able to benefit from all of this work we're doing now. So we're not having to talk about why this is important. Everybody knows, and the global population is on the same page. It takes all of us. I can't do what I do without all of those people that do the things they do within that value chain. We all are important. It's a symbiotic relationship. And it's not about agriculture versus another industry. We can't exist without each other. So, with that, I yield.
Great. Thank you, Verity. Thank you. I, if there's an observation that all of us might concur with, is that the public generally has forgotten a lot about agriculture, has forgotten a lot about the processes that have to take place just to get food on the table. So much so that we even see challenges where just recently there was a climate action group that said they were going to create a new plan for moving forward during these challenges of climate. But they felt comfortable taking out the word agriculture and taking out the word farmers, which includes farmers, ranchers, foresters, and the fisheries that we use as part of those groups that harness, again, life systems and resources to create food, fiber, feed, and fuel. The minute you remove those folks, in fact, they called them. They said we're going to call it farm systems. No, I'm sorry, global food system. It will be the replacement term for agriculture, and we'll call it frontline actors. Will be the replacement for farmers. And some of us took a little umbrage with that, a little bit of pushback, and we said that farmers aren't actors here on this planet. Farmers actually build the stage, if you will, that allows humanity to act out its tragedies, its dramas, hopefully its triumphs. And it's the farmers that build that stage because we create a consistent, reliable, dependable, hopefully predictable supply of food under all kinds of situations and under all kinds of conditions. And if unpredictable weather, to many of us, is easily translatable to say unpredictable harvest, unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvest, we better find some help here at a conference like this. We better find some new solutions at a conference like this to help us build resilience. And in building resilience, that's where we find that we have a plan B, we have a plan C, we have different ways to take what used to be perceived as waste and turn it back into energy sources and into soil amendment sources, putting that carbon back into use, even though it's perceived to be unusable because we didn't quite have the technology yet to have put it into play. Because of that, then, each of you I'd like to ask, first of all, any burning questions out there that you'd like to ask the panel after their remarks? And if you do, raise a hand. No? Well, I thought I'd ask a question of them each is, in your own operations, as you've had a career in all of them, what are the significant, if you were to look in the future, what are the significant developments that you see that are really have you more optimistic than ever based upon where we are today, based upon what you might see in the very near future? Doug?
We've never seen a brighter future. We have grown significantly over the last 20 years. When I started 20 years ago, we actually had farmer protests against ethanol plants, believe it or not, because we didn't want the traffic, we didn't want the smell, we didn't want whatever it happened to be. And it's been the greatest investment probably in agriculture in the last couple generations, I would think. And right now we're facing some similar challenges with building a pipeline throughout the Midwest to sequester that CO2. But that pipeline, if we hook up a pipeline to these ethanol plants and sequester that carbon, basically filling those holes that we've made with oil, I mean, in a lot of cases, but you just have to find a good geologic formation. But we have protests against the pipelines, but I don't think the folks that are doing the protest realize that when we lower the CI of the ethanol plant, that creates a whole new set of markets for ethanol for biofuels. Now we're getting into the SAF market. Now we're exporting to all these different countries. Now we're buying more corn, soybeans, rice, everything. A rising tide raises all boats. And that pipeline, look, the a lot of farmers in our region struggle with the politics of climate change. But take the politics out of climate change. This is a game that we have to play in agriculture. It's not going away. And so if you want a more robust growth market for your products, grains, biomass, etc., you've got to support the fact that we've got to reduce our CI. You're working on-farm scoring to help incentivize farmers to lower their CI. That plugs into this. Our CO2 pipeline plugs into this. I mean, we haven't built ethanol plants for the last 10 years because we haven't been allowed to grow. There's no free market for fuels in our country. We haven't been allowed to grow. And if we're allowed to grow, that allows more markets for agricultural products. And as I said before, those growing markets lead to innovation, lead to potential. So this right here is just, this is just the tip of the spear. We don't call ourselves ethanol producers anymore. We're bioprocessors. And that future is totally unlimited because we truly believe that we can get back in balance with nature through agriculture. That's what this is all about.
Great, thanks, Doug. Verity?
Well, I already said a lot about my hopes, but to add to that from a specific biofuel perspective, I think that near future, embracing the use of biofuels and ethanol in particular as an immediate solution to begin decarbonizing just even the transportation sector, but what that means as that ripple effect explodes, I think that's a quick way to start seeing measurable differences, to gain more traction on all of the things that we're talking about and connect those dots together. I think long term, those that'll lead us to where at least my hope, just a visionary future, is that because of that, we then as a globe realize no matter where you are in that and what your situation is, that we're in this together. And as Doug pointed out, just an example of putting in bioprocessing facilities in Africa, let's say, we've then improved the lives of people that they've never thought that they could achieve to be, and we start having this tide rides all boats, but you're balancing out across the globe for everyone to have a better life, not just those that are in a more prime environment to embrace certain things. We can then spread it around, and we all win. So, thank you.
Thanks. Bob, I'm going to modify that question a little bit for you, but it goes to an understanding that farmers manage large landscapes, small and large landscapes. And in those landscapes, you're always hoping that you can improve the landscape based upon your activities with your animals, with your farm activities, and you're looking for soil health improving. People don't recognize all over North America that the role that livestock plays in creating healthy landscapes, healthy forests, healthy rangelands, healthy lands. That's as important a part of this solution set to where climate needs to go as anything, and yet you have folks that don't quite understand that the life of a ruminant on a piece of land is a long period of time before it might go to market, and in doing that, it has a really important role to play. But there's this perception that we don't need livestock for so many different misconceptions out there. Your view of how the public might understand this better as we as we look at the circularity and the role that animals play in our nature and in our landscapes. Go ahead.
Well, I'll try and do that, but first I'm going to give you the answer I had to your first question.
Please do. And I would love to hear that.
And I think Verity said it very well. In the days of subsistence agriculture, we didn't have time to think about anything else. Or I won't say we, but our forefathers. Because of the improvements in efficiency in the system, now, as Verity said, I don't know the numbers, but it's very few people are actually producing food compared to 100 years ago. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it enabled the other people to go out and to do the research, do the science, make the policies to progress to progress. You know, the fewer people it takes to feed the population, the better off the whole population is going to be, in my mind. And I think the most important thing that I've seen recently at agriculture is the recognition by the UN and by the FAO that agriculture needs to be on the topic, on the table. People don't protest on an empty stomach. Now, to go back to your second question, on livestock, because of the nature of the rumen, and in Canada, a third of the agricultural land is occupied by cattle. The reason that is because it won't grow anything else. It grows grasses and forbs and shrubs and trees that are not utilizable by humans as far as a food source goes. Cattle can take that and turn it into a very valuable protein. In a time when we need to feed a growing population, and the FAO has said it, the UN has said it, we need all types of food, not just plant-based. We need everything. Cattle are a great contributor to the circular economy. They take what was perceived as a waste product by a lot of people, and I'm going to go right to DDGs, in a very valuable food source once we figured out how to use it. So I don't know if that answers both questions or neither one of them, but
No, it does. It does. We will continue to look at an exercise on this planet that if you can create abundance, that abundance means choices. If you have choices in what you might eat today or tomorrow or the next day or the next year, those choices reflect that we've created abundance. And the minute we have that abundance, as was described here in several different ways, we're able to live. We have ability to live and thrive. And the minute you go the other direction, that we have scarcity on the planet, that means less choices. The minute you have scarcity, you start to move away from living and towards survival. We know that as a society, as a civilization. We experienced it in a short way during COVID and during the pandemic. There was a sense that, oh, wait, our food supply is not necessarily invulnerable. It's very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to many things. We said earlier at the onset of this panel that unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvests. I know plenty of livestock operators that just sometimes you can't believe the trials and tribulations they go through with their herds when unexpected snowstorms, unexpected drought, unexpected weather phenomena just messes your whole plan up, and now you're feeding because your animals are trapped someplace, or it's not easy. In other words, we can't predict that our food is going to get on the table. In fact, so much so, when people say food is a privilege, I'll be the first to say it's not a privilege, it's a right. Food is a right. I'm sorry, let me get this statement right. Correct. A lot of people say food is a right. And I'll be the first to say food's not a right, it's a privilege. Because we can't guarantee as producers that we can get it on the plate. Or we can't guarantee that you can take every part of our food system and turn it into a positive product, but we're working on that. But the minute you can do that, and you have it on a plate, then someone can say, oh, it's a right to have access to that. But don't forget that we can't promise our food system is going to get there. And the minute people believe that it just comes out of a store, that's where our biggest challenges have been, is people don't understand how just hard it is to get food onto the store. So, Bob, go ahead.
I just want to say that the answer is not to consume less. The answer is to have the ability to consume more.
I love
And
that.
that's going to come from agriculture.
And with abundance, that's what you get. And if you have your choice, you don't want to eat meat, you don't want to eat XYZ, you want it produced a certain way, how great it is that we can find a big tent that you produce food for those folks that want to change what they want in their diet, change how they want to live their life, and let the market find that in that abundance they're busy living. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of work to do. Verity, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I will add. I think that our entire circular economy, if we want to, that's the name we want to put, doesn't work without animal agriculture. It just doesn't. Our
Can you say
agriculture,
that again, please?
it doesn't work without animal agriculture. And just examples that we've been giving on how biofuels fit in there. You need animal agriculture to complete that piece. But also in the agricultural industry, from the producer through throughput into the end user, we actually are very efficient. As Doug was talking about how the corn kernel is used, we're using almost everything. There's a value there. I mean, we've used it all. We've put it somewhere. We've created a value to it, and we've used those products to add value to something else. When I think about how to do my part in that, I've got to use every acre of land as most productively as possible. And for me, in my area that's semi-arid, I get about 18 inches of rain a year. I need livestock to make that work. It allows me to diversify my income streams. It allows me to have a way to take the grasses that we're not going to go graze the lands for our sustenance. I mean, I haven't seen anybody try that, and I don't know. I sure haven't seen that, and I think most probably have not. And they can take that and turn that into something that is a value added, that nutrient dense, that plugs right into that system, and it allows me to mitigate my risk as a farmer. And in order for me to be where I need to be as part of this value chain, I have to be able to do those things, and it's so important. In the livestock sector, through that value chain, there's nothing wasted either. They use every bit of it, no matter what animal you're talking about.
Everything but the moo?
Everything but the moo. And I think a lot of producers don't realize all of the products that do come from animals. All you ladies that are wearing makeup, you probably have some type of animal product there, unless you specifically made a certain choice not to buy a certain brand. A lot of the things that we have today are from that, and even down to we're trying to replicate certain products to resemble animal products, whether it be a hamburger or ice cream or the like. So I think it's just a matter of keeping on point that it's all a part of the puzzle, and you can't just take one out and it's all, everything still works the same.
We are here at the COP28. It's been years then of trying to introduce the concept that you can't have a response to a changing climate without a response to how we deal with the infrastructure of a planet, and that infrastructure that includes the food supply needs to be then engaged at the very front end of this discussion, because otherwise you don't have an ability to start to set up for resilience. You don't have the ability to start to plan for plan B when you don't have any water or you have too much heat. What is plan B for an agricultural producer? Or a blackout in a grid because the system is just shutting down because of different kinds of usage patterns. These challenges that are very real that we've been experiencing give us that opportunity, if you will, to push the reset button, to be nimble, turn and pivot. I mentioned COVID just a little while ago, the pandemic. We saw disruption, but we also saw the ability to say, wow, these are where our weaknesses are. These are where we have an ability to pivot and turn and focus on still feeding the planet while adjusting to a shutdown of the global food system. You all know the stories from our friends who are producers, some of the agony that was experienced in those first few months of COVID when the whole system was supposedly shut down. But the truth is, we had scarcity in most places, and most people still had a lot to eat. They just had less choices, but it scared them, scared all of us a little bit. And so, as we wind down on this panel, is there something, if there was a quick 1 minute message you could send to the deliberation process here, the folks that are trying to make a decision and evidently they were not able to make a written document that includes and involves agriculture? What would you tell them in a minute or so each? Thank you. We'll
Yeah,
finish after that.
I'll try to be quick, but we need to about agriculture from what are the issues with agriculture to how do we unleash the potential of agriculture. That has to be the message. And we've got to educate the masses on this. 2% of the folks in the United States are farmers. That means 98% don't understand agriculture. That's what we're up against, okay? We need to focus on the bigger picture, not little nitpicky things that really in the bigger scheme of things don't matter. And remember that perfection is impossible. There is no perfect solution. Science is about creating a better set of future circumstance, not a perfect set, a better set. There's no perfection in humanity. There's only different levels of better. And this is our best, highest level of better that we can put out there. I will also say that we talk about changing the world all the time because we are. And I don't mean that self-serving as poet. I mean that as agriculture is changing the world. We are all a part of that. Changing the world is going to come with resistance. Okay? It's not going to be easy. You got to keep on going. And AG and I were talking about this before. The first COP I went to was in Paris, and agriculture and oil were the two villains. Agriculture is now being seen as one of the potential greatest solutions to all of our issues. And maybe I'll leave with this. I've been studying biofuels, ethanol in particular, in agriculture for well over 20 years. And if you hear negative things about ethanol, it's not to stop ethanol, it's to stop agriculture. Okay? I will just say JFK, I think, said it best. If you're not part of the solution, there's great money to be made prolonging the problem. Don't let naysayers cast doubt in the mind of the folks. We've got a mission to accomplish, and it's going to take all of us together to get it done.
Bob?
Supposed to be Verity.
I
I just really quickly about all I can say is when the policymakers and the negotiators get up in the morning, and before they go, and I guarantee you every single one of them has breakfast first. When they're having breakfast, they could figure out where that comes from and put agriculture on the table first. You know, it's amazing to me it took so long to even start talking about, but that should be the thing they talk about.
I like that. Verity?
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, you said that well. Agriculture needs to be at the center of the conversations or in a part of it, no matter what the conversation is. It needs to be early and often so that we can add our input. Too many times there's been some policy or decision made and we get the printout and well now we have to work with how to deal with that, whereas if we were a part of the decision making process in the beginning, we could have helped guide some of those decisions so that they would make better informed decisions on from a holistic level, not just the one piece they're looking at, so that it completes the puzzle.
An observation that we have here at the COP if those of you have had the opportunity to come by over many, many years, is you recognize that this was a conference where there was a glass half empty. In fact, there seemed to be the preponderance of talk was there was a glass half empty about a world that was struggling, a world that was going through issues, a world that was not functioning correctly, and there was always a glass half full, and that seemed to have a smaller voice. I understand if there's two glasses and the glass that's half empty, if you're pouring from a pitcher of fear, the glass is half empty, and you keep on pouring there and go, it seems like you're going to throw up your hands and there's no solution set. Glass half full, though, is when you've got solutions and you've got new thinking and you've got ability to see that the past is the past, and some of the past we don't like. You were saying different levels of smart. There's certainly different levels of stupid, and agriculture could be guilty of some of those different levels of stupid just because we didn't know any better. Maybe we just knew better, but we still were stupid. That being said, that glass half full is full because you have solutions. You're pouring from a pitcher of new thinking of where this world can be, on how quickly we can change that world. And believe me, that transition is taking place at an accelerating pace of the positive things that are happening. And I want to thank this panel for being part of that positive thinking, positive change, and being able to share that knowledge. And as we said, getting agriculture on the front of the table, where you're not part of you're not being consumed and not being attacked, but actually you're contributing to everybody's positive living experience. Isn't that what this is all about after all? So
Keep food on the shelves.
thank you everybody for being here.